The date is August 28th, 2012. The location is Castine, Michigan. The time is 9 a.m. Today, the person being interviewed is Robert C. Dick at his home in Castine. The interview is being conducted by Jeff Hoffman on behalf of the Oral History Project at the Yankee Air Museum in Belleville, Michigan. Good morning, Bob. I want to thank you on behalf of the Oral History Project for permitting us to conduct this interview in your home. Question number 1.
All right, I was born in Evanston, Illinois on July 22nd, 1921. I grew up until my 14th year in a suburb of Chicago named Elmhurst, Illinois. I went to elementary school in that city. I finished junior high school in that city, and my family then moved from Elmhurst to Cambridge, Massachusetts. Cambridge, Massachusetts, I entered the end of my junior high school career. I also spent 2 years in Watertown, Massachusetts in high school. Family moved to Cambridge, Massachusetts at that point, and I entered Cambridge High-End Latin School and graduated from Cambridge High-End Latin School in 1940. I was employed by a apartment hotel in Cambridge, Massachusetts for a period of a year and a half. At the same time, I had entered Tufts University. I was working in Cambridge, Massachusetts from 5 o'clock in the afternoon until 11 at night, 6 days a week. And I applied my earnings at the apartment hotel to my tuition at Tufts University. I was a so-called commuter student at Tufts. I'm about to get into World War II.
Okay.
I was at Tufts University until during the time that the Japanese attacked Pearl Harbor. I attempted to join various branches of the service, the U.S. Navy, the Merchant Marine, and because I am a colorblind individual, I was unable to be enlisted in either of those organizations. And there was an opportunity for something called an enlisted reserve corps, which college students could join at the time, and would give them an opportunity to continue for a complete semester at college, at which point most of us were put on active duty status. We progressed from the enlisted reserve corps to active duty, and I was given an opportunity to join the Air Corps. This was one of the opportunities that was offered by the enlisted reserve corps. I was interested in aircraft, and I thought it would be probably as interesting a career in the service as I could choose, and I was given the opportunity to join at that time, the Army Air Corps.
Next page. Yeah.
This one. When I entered the service, I was 22. And I've related the reason why I picked the Air Corps. I was ordered, I was actually indoctrinated into the service at Fort Devens, Massachusetts. From Fort Devens, Massachusetts, I was ordered to my first phase of Army Air Corps training at Miami Beach. I spent approximately 2 months at in a hotel accommodation, and I trained with some college individuals on what was called the Polo Grounds in Miami Beach. After completing that phase, which included the usual military formations and requirements, I was ordered to report to Scott Air Force Base in Belleville, Illinois. At Scott, I was given training as a radio gunner, and I completed the code phase, passed the test of 16 words per minute code, and at that point I was given another physical. That physical, I don't know why it was omitted earlier, but at that physical I was determined to be red-green colorblind. At that point I was washed out of the radio gunner school because I was not able to fly. I was then ordered to a training school in Truax Field in Madison, Wisconsin. I spent approximately 2.5 months at Truax being trained in radio, amplifiers, and receivers, and some allied subjects. Was given a test at the end of that period and offered the opportunity either to continue at Truax Field as an instructor, or to go to Boca Raton, Florida, for further training in radar. The schools that we're talking about are, maybe strangely enough, Signal Corps schools, but most of the electrical training in the service was done through the Signal Corps. So I have a dual personality as both Air Force and Signal Corps. I wear a Signal Corps patch on my uniform. When I was, after determining that I wished to go to radar training school, I was sent to Boca Raton, Florida, where the Air Force training, so far as I know at the time, practically all of the Air Force training in radar was done at Boca Raton. At Boca Raton, we were divided into units of something like 8 to 10 people. We were given our schooling at night because of the heat, and we were assigned to a certain instructor. The instructor was required to pass us individually because of security through barbed wire fences into the school building. We were trained on initially on what was one of the first radar units used in Britain. So-called, it did not have the later viewing opportunities, and the aircraft that this particular unit was, where it was included, was it had Yagi antennas on the left and right wings, and the radar scope itself showed a vertical trace and blips on either side of that trace to indicate whether the aircraft was headed toward the target or not. Pretty unsatisfactory for the kind of radar that we eventually were trained with, but it gave us the fundamentals. In other words, the frequency of that particular system was fairly low. Magnetrons, which were used later on to produce the signal frequency, were not a part of the British unit, but they gave us the fundamentals. We were given tests at each phase of our training. If we failed one, we were out of the that particular phase, yep. And we did not continue. I was trained on a later unit, Signal Corps base, Signal Corps train on a what was called the SCR 517, a sea search radar unit. I was also trained on the SCR 717, and even though I was not permitted to fly in combat, I did get training on board a couple of training aircraft. One of them was a B-24, and we went on flights over the Florida Keys to familiarize ourselves with how the radar set operated. I got very basic training there because it was recognized that I would not be flying. I survived several phases of that program. At the final phase, I was given an opportunity either to go to candidate school, for officer candidate school, or to go into an advanced phase of the radars that were currently in production for use in battle. At that point, I selected the opportunity to go into the advanced phase. I was sent to Langley Field, Virginia, where a good deal of the experimental work was being done on radar and other features of bomber training. I did not know it at the time, but as I was being trained with others,
pilots,
for the type of equipment that I was going to be concerned with, I didn't know at the time, but my destination was going to be China, and there was an organization put together at Langley Field. Our ground troops were not, or our ground mechanics were not given any indication. We never knew that a B-24 bomb squadron was being formed to use this particular type of equipment. It involved sea search radar, and it involved an accessory to the sea search radar called APQ-5B, was it?
Right.
But it was otherwise known as Low Altitude Bombardment Bomb Sight. We were trained specifically on the bomb sight. We had all been trained in the fundamentals of radar before that, but we were told that it was a secret organization. We were not allowed to speak about it outside Langley at that time, and we had no connection with the unit that was being formed to fly to China to set up the low altitude bombardment operation. We graduated, so-called. We were considered fully trained in this bomb sight, and we were ordered to POE, part of embarkation, again in Miami, Florida. At Miami, Florida, the group that I was involved in were sent to the 14th floor of a hotel and kept apart from anyone in the vicinity or any other organization until the time that they woke us up in the morning one morning and put us in a covered van and took us out to the airport at Miami,
Were you blindfolded?
And we boarded a C-46 at Miami. First leg of the trip was Borinquen Field, Puerto Rico. From Puerto Rico, we proceeded in the C-46 down to such places as Belém in South America. And we terminated that phase of our trip at Natal, Brazil. At Natal, Brazil, we were given, and from then on.
Okay.
Yeah. When we arrived at Natal, we were told we were going to be scheduled. We had priority over some units and no priority over others, but the priorities were set up for air transportation to our final destination, and we were not involved. We were not informed what our final destination would be. We were also told to restrict our conversations anywhere en route, to reject any mention of radar or what we were doing. And the materials that had been used in our training were taken from us, and we were told that we would receive a representative part of that material when we reached our destination. At no time during our travels to our final destination, which proves to be China, were we told where we were going or what we were going to do when we got there. At Natal, we were put aboard a version of the B-24 called a C-89, the transport version, via Ascension Island, and Ascension Island to what was then British West Africa, a place called Accra. We approximately a 6 to 8 hour segment to Ascension Island, and another 6 to 8 hours to British West Africa. We were at British West Africa. We were subject to the we had to comply with the priorities that had been established before we started on our trip. We didn't know where we were going at that point, but we knew we were going to a fairly distant destination. At Accra, we were stopped for about a week or so. One of the notable features of Accra was it was a wonderful place for mahogany. We had the most luxurious latrines I have ever seen, and we also enjoyed our food there. Can't say as much from there on in, but we went on our scheduled flights from there at Natal. That was the end of our four-engine transportation. We went from Accra to places like Khartoum, Anglo-Egyptian Sudan, Arabian places of El Fasher, and places in between. I won't go into all that. We flew over the Taj Mahal one evening and landed there and stayed overnight at Agra. Was memorable because it was quite a scene, and we were on a C-47. Mm-hmm. We used C-46s, C-47s. As I say, we were not on any four-engine equipment from then on. We found ourselves in India, which I just mentioned. From there on in, we went to the major destination was Karachi. At Karachi, we were stopped because of the restrictions on travel, and we had to be placed in a queue and until our number came up. We were in Karachi. We're in Karachi in a monsoon season. We were up to our knees in water, and we were issued rubber boots. Pretty nasty place. I contracted dysentery of a certain, there are various types, but I had a bad one. So they put me in the hospital for about 2 weeks. And I have since concluded that they were giving me a sulfa drug that did the trick. I spent about 2 weeks in the hospital and was discharged in time to stay with my unit, which was always a concern. Yeah. You did not want to get split from your unit. From Karachi, we went, when we were on our way again, to a place called Shabwa. Shabwa was a main installation for ATC, for CBI aircraft, and it was also a mechanical base. In other words, if the aircraft, well, we found out we were going to China, but aircraft that needed major attention came from China over the hump into Shabwa, and Shabwa was the main base for repair, engine changes, things like that. And the first stop on the other side of the hump after Shabwa was Kunming. We were on a C-46 over the hump. Most of us were still together, and when we got to Kunming, we were assigned. The to the 308th Group Heavy and the 425th Squadron Heavy. Okay. We were assigned to barracks at the 425th Squadron installation. The barracks and all the installations that we where we were billeted in China were maintained, and where construction was needed, constructed by the Chinese Chiang Kai-shek government. They did not allow the United States any opportunity to own any land in China, but they provided facilities, and they made runways. They did probably hundreds of things for the 14th Air Force. And on occasion we were able to see our General Chennault, and there were four individual squadrons, all B-24s, and the group, which consisted of the 425th, the 373rd, the 374th, and the 375th squadrons. The main headquarters were at Kunming. General Chennault was there. I have seen General Chennault and on one occasion Chiang Kai-shek. We were assigned a unit on the flight line, and we occupied a shop specifically for both the radar search, the search radars, which were the APS-15. There were H2X units. H2X meaning that these were late model and high frequency, and considerably advanced from anything that we were trained on at Boca Raton. But the training that we got earlier at Langley Field was the important part of our mission. We were a little surprised when we found out that we didn't have a commanding officer. We had a staff sergeant who ran the shop. There were assignments to various parts of the equipment. The sea search equipment was handled by some of the group. Something called an APN altimeter was another special feature of the low altitude bombardment equipment, and there was a unit called an airborne transponder. I think the number was SER 749, which operated to query the IFF sets that identified your aircraft as friendly or otherwise, and was used also to make sure that we were crews were making a bombing run against an enemy ship instead of one of our own on the South China Sea. Most of their operations with this particular kind of equipment were conducted on 12 to 14 hour search missions, sometimes independent aircraft, rarely anything more than 3 aircraft at a time, and they were not dispatched from Kunming. They were dispatched from forward bases at Luzhou and Sichuan and places like that. They went out over the South China Sea looking for targets on the sea search radar. At that point, they may have had an opportunity to do some good. They may not, but in most cases they found targets anywhere from sampans and junks to naval vessels, Japanese naval vessels.
Like a cruiser?
Of the cruiser class.
Right, okay.
It was a very special organization because of its specialty.
Yeah.
Our aircraft also laid mines in rivers. They were specialized types, 1,100-pound mines, and there was a naval unit in Kunming. It was just, I don't think there were more than a dozen people in it, but they were assigned because they had a special type of mine and they had to be fused with a secret fuse. And the Navy personnel did that. We hung the mines, our people hung the mines in the bomb bays, but they had to be fused by a naval individual. So all of this was sort of cloak and dagger stuff. I don't know today, I was never told whether one of my functions was to pre-flight the APQ-5B, the accessory unit to the sea search unit that the bombardier used on low-level, low-altitude bombing of enemy ships, no matter what they were. I was never told whether or not the equipment that I worked on worked or not. I kind of think that I would have heard about it if I had not, but we were a unit by itself.
Right.
We had certain things to do. We did them. We hope we did them well. We don't know. But we know that quite a number of ships got sunk. A lot of mines were laid. Yeah. And when there was, one of the problems also in China, of course, and the big problem was that everything came over the hump.
Right.
And fuel, no matter what it was,
bombs,
except for food, which was pretty much Chinese provided. We ate a lot of eggs. And I'm not sure, but we had some so-called steaks that came off of over the hill water buffalo. But we survived pretty well. We had a PX ration once a month. That was the extent of the restriction on anything other than fuel and munitions coming over the hump, and a number of our B-24s, if they went to Chaboa for another reason, such as mechanical, when they came back over the hump, they were loaded with supplies.
Right.
We were so-called self-supporting.
Yeah.
And pretty largely that was an accurate description. He didn't waste anything. At one point, the decision was made to put all of the LAB, that is the APQ-5B aircraft, they were B-24Js mainly, and these aircraft were segregated, and whether they came from the 425th or the 374th or 375th, all of the aircraft that were equipped with the special equipment were put into the 373rd Squadron and based at Luliang, China. The pickings in the South China Sea got kind of meager because at the end of the war they totaled things up. They found out we had sunk or grievously damaged about 2 million tons of shipping with a relative pittance in aircraft.
Yeah, yeah.
But pickings got slim, and about that time, we're talking now about 1945.
Yeah.
And the decision was made to attach the 373rd to the 7th Air Force instead of the 14th. Most of us who were in the so-called secret organization were sent to back over the hump to this time to Calcutta, a suburb of Calcutta, a place called Kashrapara, where there was an army base there, and we were being prepared for boarding an attack transport called the H.B. Freeman, which was based at the time and loading up for a special trip from Calcutta around the underside of Australia, and between Australia and New Zealand, and through New Guinea, some of the Philippines, and final destination, we found out finally was Okinawa, in preparation for the air offensive against Japan. We were stationed at Calcutta, awaiting that, just cooling our heels until everything was on shipboard. The name of it was the H.B. Freeman, USS H.B. Freeman. It was a Coast Guard vessel with approximately 5,000 troops on board.
Wow.
We were not told a whole lot about where we were going or what we were going to do until we were practically there. We were fortunate. After this long trip, it was unescorted. This particular ship had 5-inch rifles on the bow and the stern, approximately 16 40-millimeter dual mounts on the superstructure, and a whole bunch of 20-millimeter cannon scattered around on the ship, plus paravanes for floating mines, whole business. Most gunned up transport I ever saw, but my recollection is that in some place off an island in New Guinea, we had to stop for fuel, and most of the fueling was done at sea. Oh. And that was going on. We were being refueled for the final leg of the trip to Okinawa. During that period, we received word of the surrender. At that point, the skies were a lot bluer, and we were just sort of taking a free ride, except for a possible mine that hadn't been picked up in the harbor. But we landed on a coastline town called Naha. Naha was originally a university. When we arrived in Naha, it was pulverized. There was concrete buildings were reduced to absolute rubble from the bombardments. Yeah. Not just Japanese, but our own. Yeah. And so there was very little for us to do when we disembarked at Naha. We were taken to an area probably 15 minutes away from Naha by road, and billeted in tents. All of the ground people were in this organization that I don't know what you call it at this point. It was a unit. And our B-24s were parked up on Yantan Airfield. They did not participate in any sea search operations after that. Two of the things that happened to us that we were exceptionally excited about was typhoons. Oh, yeah. Yeah. We had two heavy typhoons, one of which sank an awful lot of ships in Buckner Bay. We went through we had 6 of us had a 12, what's called a squad tent. It's made for 12 men. And we rode one of those things out when they were clocking. The crews were up in their aircraft, just up there doing what they could. They clocked some of the gusts at 200 miles an hour on one of the typhoons. Strangely enough, we were on the lee side, and we kept that 12-man squad tent up all night. We drove 2 sets of tent pegs for every. If one of them pulled out, we put the guy rope onto that. Drove in another tent peg, and we just kept shifting those things all night long. Yeah. Our tent was still up, but it was condemned because it was no longer waterproof.
Yeah.
But, I mean, this is just, at this point, the heat was really off. We were just waiting for our number to come up and get put on some kind of conveyance back to the States. So we left and on a I don't remember the number or the name of the ship. It was a Coast Guard cargo transport, cargo and personnel transport, and I think it was just a short time before Christmas when we climbed up the sides of the cargo nets and got stowed away, and we almost had ourselves 2 Christmases. We crossed the international date line.
Oh, yeah.
Didn't quite make it, but we came into, on the way back, our final destination was Vancouver Barracks in Washington.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where we landed. A lot of stuff in between, but it would take a long, long time to keep repeating, and but I thank my lucky stars. That's all. I was lucky. Didn't get bombed too often in Kunming. And
mm-hmm.
I think it was Christmas Eve. Some yokel from a Japanese Air Force came over and dropped a stick of bombs on Kunming, and we all spent a few hours at the slit trenches.
Yeah.
But he didn't do any damage. So I was rarely under attack.
Mm-hmm.
I think some of us were just lucky. I consider myself lucky.
Yeah.
And but it was an interesting time. They had a little shop on the flight line where they had a big samovar of tea, and we could go pick up a gingerbread, piece of gingerbread, and have tea.
Oh.
Crazy operation, but that's the way things were.
Yeah.
Had a couple of USO troops arrive. I think I told a story about
Pat O'Brien.
Pat O'Brien,
Yeah.
and a USO troop.
Yeah.
And there was one undamaged well, there was one undamaged stage in a hangar on the flight line at Kunming,
Mm-hmm.
and Pat O'Brien and troop were performing there. There was a system of air raid warnings in China, where it was called, they would raise a ball up on a pole. If it was one ball, you were supposed to be aware of the fact that you might go a little farther than that. If they put up another ball, it was called a 2-ball warning, and you started looking for a place to go.
Yeah.
And if it was a 3-ball, forget it. They were right on top of the airport. So, the Chinese had their own systems, and they worked. But Pat O'Brien and his troop only performed for about, I'd say, less than a half an hour. And one of our officers got up on the stage and raised 2 fingers, and the place cleared out. We thought maybe Pat and the group would be back later, and they didn't reappear, so we missed out. We had very few USO organizations. Well, principally, there was anything coming over the hump was
supplies. Yeah,
pretty valuable stuff.
Right.
And not even, well, even, we got food maybe once a month. We got a PX ration once a month. Things that were not absolutely essential didn't come over the hump in our aircraft or air transport aircraft. A lot of C-46s came over the hump. I was in a C-46 as we flew in. I was on a C-54 on the way out. And we didn't even know about C-54s at that point. They were brand new. You know them as a DC-4 and
commercial.
Present day.
Right.
Douglas DC-4. That was a C-54.
Yeah.
On the way out, we stopped in Michigan, which had been suppressed. The Japanese were in retreat practically everywhere at that point.
Yeah.
The Burma Road was cut originally, and of course that's the reason why they couldn't get things over the hump by road. So everything had to be flown. Which is not news anymore.
Yeah.
Okay, when we were processed at Vancouver Barracks for return to our destination for discharge, and I had been put on active duty in Fort Devens, Massachusetts. We were taken by troop train from Vancouver Barracks after being issued new uniforms and stuff.
Yep.
We went on a troop train mainly through Canada and ended up back at Fort Devens, Massachusetts. And that was where I was formally discharged. There was no big homecoming, and we didn't really care.
Yeah.
No, I was all by myself when I got off the train in Cambridge, Massachusetts.
The gun?
And yeah, I had my duffel bag.
Yep.
And a Japanese rifle, purely a demonstration item. Never, I don't know whether it was ever fired or not. I don't know anything about it, but I acquired it on Okinawa, and several of us did. We just, they're keepsakes. That's all. I was at discharge. I was a buck sergeant. close friendships while in the service? Frankly, no. I recall one. I was working for American Airlines when I came back after I graduated, and I was at Philadelphia Airport one evening, and a guy yelled at me that had been in the ordnance group, the guys who prepared the bombs for and put them in the bomb racks of the aircraft, stuff like that. And he remembered me, and I remembered him. And we had a brief memory session of about 10 minutes in the lobby of the old, they call it the airport shack in Philadelphia, the original. And we had a few minutes. He didn't have any contacts. I didn't have any contacts. And the organization was so small. We have a picture of the people in the radar organization. We went on a side trip up to what was called the Temple of 1,000 Idols up on the old Burma Road. A bunch of us in a 6x6 and took a picnic lunch, believe it or not. Went up there, and that is the picture of the people in that on that print are about the sum total of the people that were in the radar detachment. And I think with two hands you could just about note what the size of the organization was, maybe 24. Consequently, there weren't too many people for us spread around the states. And I don't think we ever asked each other what our home addresses were.
This wasn't meant to be.
We got the heck out of there. That was the main thing.
44?
As for close friendships in the service, I was in Madison, Wisconsin, at Truax Field, in training with, I went to Tufts College, Tufts University, before I entered the service. I had 3 semesters in, I had some to complete. But there were 5 of us from Tufts University, and one of the instructors at Truax was from Tufts. And we had a friendship going. We had a relatively decent relationship at Truax with the local people. And so we did have a chance on our days off to go into Madison, Wisconsin, and have a meal at a restaurant or something like that. But aside from that, we were split. We went in different directions.
44?
Now, I did, talking about continuing relationships, one of the individuals who was at Truax got back to Tufts University at in the same semester that I did. We both returned in time in 1946 to start our education again.
Mm-hmm.
And we were friends from that time, and I continued correspondence with him for from that time on until his death within the past year.
Oh.
I'm a member of the Air Force Association.
Okay.
I did not join anything else as far as the service goes.
Yeah.
And I still am a member of the Air Force Association.
Mm-hmm.
I did complete my Tufts education, received a bachelor's degree in 1947. I was in the class of 44.
Mm-hmm.
And I retained my relationship as a member of the class of 44. But my graduation was with my buddy in June of 1947. Yes, did I receive the GI Bill? I was very pleased with the GI Bill because I didn't have to work when I came back and went to college.
Mm-hmm.
It was taken care of, and besides that I had supplemental income. So I was very pleased with the GI Bill. I also took advantage of the opportunity to acquire a home. I bought a house in Philadelphia on a GI Bill on one of under very good terms, and I can't say enough about the GI Bill. I think it was a wonderful thing.
Yeah.
After graduation at Tufts, I had an opportunity to teach at Wilbraham Academy. I went to Wilbraham Academy and was accepted as a teacher, but I had also put in a bid for an opportunity at American Airlines. It opened up, and I declined the opportunity to become an instructor at Wilbraham Academy. I went to American Airlines Training School in Ardmore, Oklahoma, when I started with them. And I spent a month and a half in training. They had a rather interesting relationship. We were given weekly phases of their education, and every Saturday we took a test. If we did not pass the test, that individual did not appear in classes on Monday morning. We went through, one of the fellows who was, tell you how bad the job situation was at the time. One of the fellows had just graduated from Columbia Law School. He was in my class, and he was top of the class, I was number 2, and we were given our opportunities. They told us that we would have a job with American Airlines if we passed our training unit. And at that point, he said, well, how do we do this? How do we sort this out? They had opportunities all over the United States. And there was nothing in Boston. And there was an opportunity in Providence. One of the guys had a family in Providence. So we went into a room. They said, okay, guys, go in a room and pick your station. And there was nothing in Boston. There was this a Providence opportunity. This guy got it. I was given an opportunity to go to Philadelphia. Mm-hmm. That was the closest I could get to Boston. My family was in Boston. So I went to Philadelphia. Mm-hmm. I started out in Philadelphia as a passenger and cargo agent. I progressed to what was called a lead agent position, which is responsibility for quality and quantity of product. I progressed from that into what was a chief agent position, managerial position. And I was still in the operations department. I got a call from a manager of operations and said, I'm not satisfied with the fellow who's running the freight operation. And he said, go down there and take over. So I became chief agent in freight. And I had obviously customer contacts in that job, and I used to write letters to people who were, for one reason or another, usually unpleasant, but once in a while congratulatory.
Yeah.
But at that point, I was writing my own letters. Incidentally, that was letters written on an Underwood typewriter that was very manual and had sticky keys. And we were conscious of expense in those days. So I got a can of gasoline and poured it through the typewriter and continued to do my customer correspondence on it. But I got a call from I used to send copies to the fellow who was in charge of claims administration in New York. American's general office was in New York at the time. And one day I got a call from him and he said, do you write your own letters? I said, yeah. He said, well, how'd you like a job in the general office? He said, I have a senior analyst position up here. And so I went up and the guy who ran the show was the vice president of the Treasury Department for American Airlines. And he had been an 8th Air Force pilot. Oh. But a really, really good guy, one of the smartest guys I've ever run into. And so I went for an interview with him, and we got along all right. And he said, how much do you want? Yeah, I told him. He said, okay. And my wife and I packed up and went to New York.
Yeah.
And I commuted for, what was it, 14, no, not 14 years, 16 years in New York. And I was second in command there. I went from an analyst to a manager. And the fellow who called me on the phone was about ready to retire. About that time, American Airlines decided to move to Dallas-Fort Worth. And I had something like 7 years left to go before retirement. And they made me a director. And I went to I lived in a suburb of Fort Worth, and I showed up about 5 o'clock in the morning every morning. But no, I ran the claims department for a while, about 7 years. And at that point, they said, "Okay, you know, this is it." I said, "Fine with me." So we started looking we had been on vacation up here in New England, and a place called Castine, which we finally found after wandering all over Maine. And there was a house that we thought was affordable and a good spot, and we moved, and we've been in Castine ever since, from 1986 until today. So what can I say?
Is there anything else you'd like to add?
Kept up to date with developments and advancements. Oh, after you retired. Well, I went back to work.
Yeah. Yeah.
No, Castine is a beautiful little village. Has a Maine Maritime Academy is located here, and there's a lot of work to do within the town organization, and I spent let's see, 20 years as the manager of the Board of Appeals. I spent from 1988 to the present as the secretary of the Castine Community Hospital Corporation, and it's a position I hold presently. I was vice president of the Castine Historical Society. I graduated from a school for EMTs, emergency medical technicians, and I spent about 2.5 years on the Baggage Ambulance Corps. a number of things that just, well, I also, I was the collector and the treasurer for the Unitarian Church in Castine for a number of years. I presided as the chairman of a search committee for the minister of the church, the Unitarian Church at Castine. There are lots of odds and ends of things to do in this little town, and I continue to be interested in town affairs. And as a matter of fact, the hospital corporation. I am presently, I'll call it physically impaired. My hearing is not what it used to be, but aside from that, ambulatory.
Okay. Well,
You want any more?
Bob, on behalf of the Yankee Air Museum, I thank you for letting me come into your home and conduct this interview. It was really a distinct privilege and a rewarding experience to listen to your story. Thank you very much.